The story is told, though who can say if it be true, of a clan of medieval warriors awoken in modern-day Manhattan, of the animated series that told their story.
It is an age of darkness. Superstition and the sword rule. It is an age of fear. It is the age of gargoyles.
Welcome to Voices from the Eyrie, a Gargoyles podcast.
Welcome back, Gargoyles fans, to another episode of Voices from the Eyrie, a Gargoyles podcast. I'm your co-host, Greg Mashansky, and joining me as usual is my partner in crime, and I can say for this episode, my favorite Valkyrie, Jennifer L. Anderson.
Hello, everyone.
How are you today, Jen?
Doing pretty good for a Wednesday.
Wednesday, hump day, fun. And rejoining us as usual is the creator of Gargoyles and the co-producer of the series, Mr. Greg Weisman.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Greg. How are you today?
I am good. I think I'm a little taller today than I was yesterday.
Okay. Excellent.
Did he borrow Trump's lifts?
I'm most definitely shrinking, so
I'm growing just in the wrong direction.
All right. And we're very happy to have with us again the co-producer of the series, Mr. Frank Parr.
Hello, everyone.
How are you today, Frank?
I'm okay. I'm just fine and dandy. Nothing wrong with me. It's a daisy.
Well, good. We want you to stay healthy because right now we actually have some news to discuss. Well, we want to stay healthy because we like you. You're a great guy, but also these art skills. So we're going to talk about that right now. We're going to do a short segment of news and first impressions.
This is Nightwatch, reporting from New York, Travis Marshall.
Tonight, more on the news that has rocked Manhattan, if not the world.
There hasn't been much press about this yet, but the Fantastic Four Gargoyles crossover.
Yeah, so there was a little 4-page tease by me and George Comedeus in the back of Demona Zero, sort of picking up where Demona Zero ends, where the story that Frank and I did together ends. We pick up with the Gargoyles returning to the castle, and most of them heading down into the castle, but Angela and Broadway and Lexington are standing on the parapets when they see a flare go off, a very specific flare with the number 4. And so they follow the flare to a very specific building known as the Baxter Building in Midtown Manhattan. And there they encounter the Fantastic Four. And we are doing, they'll be out this fall. I've already written both scripts. Marvel is doing the Fantastic Four meets the Gargoyles, and they're publishing that. Mm-hmm. And then Dynamite is publishing Gargoyles meets the Fantastic Four. And both books are coming out in the fall. The Marvel one, I think, comes out first. It better come out first. It was written to come out first. And then George and I are doing the Dynamite one after. That is, George is working on the Dynamite one. And there's an artist working on the Marvel one, too, but they haven't announced who that is yet. So I don't know if that's a secret or not. So I'm hesitant to say anything.
I'm glad to see George joining again.
Yeah, always great to work with George. He sent me a great email. He's very excited to be working on the book, to be doing Gargoyles again, and also he's a big Marvel fan too, so it's sort of a real treat for him. So we're going to see some really fun stuff from George on the book, and it'll be great.
The question a lot of fans are asking, and I'm going to ask you this, I mean, is this canon? Because I've seen some people be a little bit confused about that.
It's not. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. They're in continuity with each other, these 3 Fantastic Four stories, the one in Demona Zero and the two that'll come out in the fall. They're all in continuity with each other, but they're not in continuity with either the main Gargoyles canon or with main Marvel 616 canon. On the other hand, we are all trying to make it feel, for the fun of it, as canon-esque, shall we say, as they can possibly be for both sides. But one big unspoken thing is that, and we had discussions about this. They're like, no, do the modern FF. I'm like, do you want the FF from the 90s? And they're like, no, do the modern FF. And so we're doing the modern FF with the Gargoyles. Gargoyles, of course, being set in 1997. And I guess, the FF story being set in 2025. And we just don't bring up what year it is at all. Because
don't ask, don't tell.
Those don't actually mesh at all. But it's, like I said, it's fun. I think, the fans, I think everyone's in character. So, it's not like just wacky, silly stuff. But I think they're just two really fun stories. And I think the fans of both, hopefully you're fans of both, but if you're just fans of one or fans of the other, or if just the combo intrigues you, just enjoy it, But no, it's not canon, because the Gargoyles universe and the Marvel universe are two separate things. They're not. This isn't a multiverse thing where they're traveling from one dimension to another. That's not it. We're just playing it like in these three stories. Just assume they're both in Manhattan, and for me, it's fun because when we talked about Gargoyles with Eisner all those years ago, we talked about building a Gargoyles sort of a Disney action universe around Gargoyles. And the idea, literally, we had conversations like this, was that Gargoyles would be, in essence, the Fantastic Four of the Gargoyles universe, that the Manhattan Clan would be, and that, we'd have Pendragon and New Olympians and Time Dancer and all these other things and all these other characters, and we'd begin to build heroes around the world and that kind of thing. But who would be the first family of this universe? And that would be the Gargoyles. And who's the first family of the Marvel universe? That's the Fantastic Four, Stan and Jack and Steve and all those guys. They, started with the FF and built a whole kind of universe that interacted with each other, beginning with those four characters. And so the idea of sort of these two first families of these universes coming together, I just think thematically is super cool. I also think for Gargoyles, let's face it, FF, particularly with a big movie coming out this summer, FF is a much more prominent property. So the idea that Dynamite, Disney, and Marvel all are like, hey, let's team these up. I think that says something about where Gargoyles stands from the standpoint of Disney's publishing arm. But I also think it again, FF's a much bigger property. I think that gives it some attention, and I think it helps. And then on top of that, I think we're going to get some gorgeous art, and I think these stories are a lot of fun. So I think the fans will enjoy them. But yeah, not to take them sort of seriously from a canon standpoint. They're not canon, but they're in character. And there are little Easter eggs. There are things that happen in them that only involve the Gargoyles, that I think you can take as like something kind of like that might have happened in the Gargoyles universe, just not exactly, and certainly not with Marvel characters.
Jen, what do you think of this news?
I am really super excited about it. Just the idea that having these characters all in a story together is I'm just really looking forward to it. And seeing that the pages at the end of the comic, I made some inhuman noises. It was it was like oh, kick my feet, oh, I love it, it's so good.
I think it's also interesting because I've got two different editors, right? I've got Michelle editing at Marvel, and I got Nate editing at Dynamite, and they've got two different sort of editorial stances. Michelle was like, "Yeah, let's throw this in, let's throw that in, let's yeah, do that too, that kind of thing." And Nate was like, "You've got too much in here. Let's get down to the core characters here. Let's and I think both are really overstuffed, but one of them is like everything in the kitchen sink, and the other one is a little more focused. But
It's going to be fun.
But
Nice.
So there are two different approaches too. But I think they're both going to be really fun books.
My thoughts on this were I'm actually quite looking forward to it. And a decade ago, that was surprise. Of course, a decade ago, I never would have saw this coming. So I wrote this long post and asked Greg over a decade ago about how I would not want to see these two universes merge. But that was also a long time ago. I was a lot more rigid about this sort of thing back then. And also, you know what? If Batman can meet the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and that can be fun,
See,
so
and
can
that's
this.
it feels like those kind of, they'd have the DC Marvel like mashup comics and stuff like that. Like, I loved that stuff. So
Yeah.
And again, I wouldn't disagree with the statement. I don't want to see these universes merge.
No.
I'm not, and that's not what we're doing. I mean, that is what we're doing here, but just for a couple issues, you know. I mean,
fine.
It's not the same thing as like, okay, now we've got to force these two sometimes compatible but often incompatible worlds to work together somehow, when they were never designed. Either one was ever designed for that. It's just like, no, we're going to have fun with these characters. We're just going to have fun. They're both based in New York. Let's just don't sweat it. We're literally not even sweating what year it's taking place in, what decade it's taking place in, what century it's taking place in, because one's set in the 20th and one's set in the 21st. We're not sweating that stuff. We're just going to have fun with it.
Well, I love me some crossover fanfic, so
that's what it is. Think of it that way.
It's really going to be
well drawn by.
It's going to be fun.
Yeah,
I look forward to it. All right, and Demona issue 0 came out, and that seems to have done well. I've heard, including my own comic shop, it went fast. I've heard it went fast at other places too, and even Bleeding Cool wrote an article about how it went fast. And now there's copies of it on eBay for $10 a piece.
Yeah,
and I didn't see them write that about anything else. So apparently, 70.
I was talking to Ed after the signing, and he said that they had none left at any of his 3 stores. Frank and I did a signing at Collector's Paradise in Pasadena on Saturday on Free Comic Book Day, which was fun. And Collector's Paradise has 2 other stores in the Los Angeles area. And by the end of the day, there were no Demonas left at all.
Well, I more often than not, people were worried that they were not going to find one. People were driving around from store to store trying to find some place that still had them. So,
and there's fans who got extra copies that are hooking other fans up. It's lovely to see.
Yeah.
I mean, this copy I've got right here, this is actually my extra copy, and it might be going to Karen in a few months. We'll see. But I'm going to ask a question to Frank. Frank, welcome aboard. What's it like?
Frank's here?
Yeah, Frank's here. Frank, how does it feel to be revisiting these characters in this world?
Oh, I had kind of a build up to that for the past, before Greg and I had our discussion about possibility for the comic. I had spent a couple of years just kind of dabbling with the characters, trying to improve my art style, that sort of thing. So, and Gargoyles has always been very popular amongst the fans, what fans I have. So by the time I talked to Greg, I had, some fairly good confidence in my skills at the time. So, and they're always fun to draw. Just not at this pace.
This grueling schedule.
We make do.
We'll discuss this a little bit more. Jen, do you have a first impression about Demona issue 0?
Demona playing Xanatos Gambit, like, sure, it's all about this, and we're going. And it's just going to be good. I think it's going to be good. I was lucky enough to have gotten the comic early, and I've like been biting my own face to not say anything about it. So
Now you can.
Now I can, and I'm looking forward to now that our little group of fans have all got it in their hot little hands. Looking forward to pulling it apart with them and seeing what they think about it.
Totally. My first impression, and I guess this is more for Frank than for Greg, I love that armor design on Demona. I mean, part of the thing about this is when you take a character, and this character's been out for 30 years, with an iconic design, and you introduce a new element towards it, sometimes that can not be taken well. You know how some fans tend to be, but no one's complained about this. It looks terrific, this armor she's wearing. I mean, I don't know if this is going to be permanent or not. I mean, it takes place during Quest, and she's back in her classic outfit in 4 and 5 of Quest, but this is still really cool looking.
It is very cool looking. I love it.
Cool looking too. When I was going through this again, leading up to this, I was doing a lot of illustration. I thought, she's been around. She's probably had a lot of different. She's worn a lot of different outfits over 1,000 years. So I
got to stay in fashion.
Well, it's not even fashion, it's practicality, and it's just there are a whole different worlds out there that she's encountered that we haven't even discussed yet. And everything leaves an impression, and everything she does has, in my mind, she has reason. When she showed up the way she did in the series, she showed up in an outfit that the clan remembered her in, and it disarmed them. And it was meant to play on their sympathies. So, we see her in future tense, and she's dressed up in modern armor and things. So she's adaptive to the times around her. It's kind of how I see her. So it's she's not somebody. He will do things on a whim, but she can be very fashionable when she wants to.
That makes sense. I know in some of the flashbacks in Hunter's Moon, she was back in her classic outfit, so maybe there was reasons for that. Maybe not. Maybe we'll find out. But either way, I'm intrigued. And Jen, I also want to hear some of your thoughts on this, but especially towards Frank. Those action sequences.
The fight scenes, man, were so well choreographed.
Yeah, I was like, how do I do this? How do I put these things together? I just put it together like it's just an abbreviated storyboard for me. The big difference is I had to finish the drawings up. Because usually a few sketches will get you through on a storyboard. But in comics, you can't. You have to draw these things out. So there's a looseness to the style, but it's complete. It's there, and something it's like when a character is in motion, the looser the character is drawn, the better it works. But when they're when they're not in motion, such as the splash page on that, everything is very well. It's really chiseled together. And then on the very next page, when you have the big other splash page of her, it's a little looser, but it needs to be. So you play at the idea is you play with these styles in telling the story and trying to get the most you can out of it visually. Try to get you into what's going on behind her, behind her facade, her face, into her mind. But anyway, but yeah, it was interesting. What was interesting was just reliving the gargoyles themselves, all those years ago, and creating a lot of these big setups we did. So
Backgrounds looked terrific. Everything looked terrific, and it was great to see you drawing some of the newer characters like Katana and Antoinette Dracon.
Yeah, they were fun. Greg puts together some fun characters. It's a challenge. He likes to challenge me and on stuff. And
Issue 1 was just brutal.
A little too challenging?
Well, it's schedule. This is kind of a love letter to the fans, really. I mean, it's also for me just to prove that I can do the stuff. Because I have a lot of friends in animation that came from comics. And, I almost went into comics, but Marvel didn't like my stuff. They said I was not up to stuff. And then I wound up doing all their animation. So that was a good trade-off.
Well, it looked beautiful, and hey, I've seen you do Fantastic Four and Avengers vs. Mighty Heroes to tie it back there. That was always fun. And but no, it was good. It was a very good issue. I cannot wait for the rest of the series. Jen, what about you?
The thing is, like, just knowing that it's these two crazy guys working on it together makes it's brand new, but it's very nostalgic, and I'm really looking forward to it.
I just really want to highlight one panel that I so love. I mean, I love the whole issue, but when Demona returns to her home and Antoinette says, "How'd it go?" and Demona looks back over her shoulder and smiles. That one panel, first off, tells you so much. But it's so gorgeous. I mean, Frank, it's so gorgeous. And also, I think both of us would probably want to give props to Robbie Bavard, who colored the lights.
So nice on it. There's something to it. He caught on to the mood I was trying to draw, and he enhanced it. With his color work on there, and with the candle lights and everything else that we put in there, he just nailed it. You always love to see your work enhanced. And he's just been really good at that.
He has. He really has. He's a terrific colorist. I mean, this is just a dream team, the three of you on this book together. Jen, I know the dream team is your term. Sorry that I stole it.
That's okay.
I think it belonged to a bunch of basket players in the Olympics.
Oh.
Well, I don't know anything about sports, so I wouldn't have known that.
Well, you're probably quite young, too.
20 years ago, I was in my 20s. I wasn't that young. Yeah, I was, but yeah. But anyway, it was just so good. And that panel you mentioned, Greg, I've seen a few people say they want a poster of that panel. So it spoke to a lot of people.
It's just gorgeous. I love it.
I do too. I cannot wait.
I mean, again, I love the whole issue. I'm not exactly unbiased in my whole thing, but that one panel just knocked me out.
All right. Well, there's nothing else. These are our first impressions. We'll do a deep dive on this eventually when we come back around and to talk about the Demona miniseries in depth. But until then, we do have an episode to discuss Eye of the Storm. And Frank, do you want to stick around, or are we keeping you?
Like I said, I don't recall that much of it. Honestly, I'd be listening mostly.
Well, you got stuff to do, man. We're glad we had you here for this part, for sure.
Thank you.
Yes. Oops, too much information.
All right. Anyway, Frank, if you got to go, then we'll talk to you next time.
All right. Take care. It's been fun.
Take care, everybody.
This has been Night Watch. Sleep well.
Okay, so we're going to transition over to Eye of the Storm, and we've teased plenty of Nordic elements in the series before, and Jen, I know you're very into Nordic folklore. I mean, like I said, there's a reason I called you my favorite Valkyrie at the beginning of this. I've seen you cosplay as Valkyries before, and very well, I might add. And so it was cool to bring Odin into the series. Jen, what did you think of Odin?
We're seeing all these different gods. So I felt like, especially having the Eye of Odin with us, that it was probably a matter of time before we got to actually meet the man himself. But the second he shows up, his one eye, exactly when you're like, oh, we're getting it. So,
I mean, I remember the first time I watched this. I don't think, for some reason, by then I should have been, but I don't think I was expecting Odin to show up in the series proper, probably because I wasn't thinking of this as his actual eye, just a talisman named after it, because, well, it's, at least as far as I knew at the time, it wasn't an eye, it was a jewel. But as soon as he stepped out of the snow, I knew who he was right away. And that is just a fantastic design. That for the that
I
cloak-
love the character design on him and on Goliath's armor. Like, just love those so much.
I thought it was interesting, kind of in hindsight, watching last night, how many clothing changes we gave to Odin, Elisa, Eric, Gunther. Usually, for obvious ease of animation, but also just budgetary reasons. There's a reason Elisa is usually in the same clothes every single episode. It becomes budgetarily almost impossible to, particularly back in the 90s, to switch clothes. And when you do, it's very much like, oh, she's undercover, so we have a reason to do this. So she's playing this Gunmall Sally, so we put her in a blonde wig.
It's part of the story to have a different outfit.
But here, it's not just, she puts on one sweater at one point, and then later in the episode, she's fully decked out in a park and all this. I'm like, wow, we didn't just do two things because it was cold. We had to put her in something warm. We actually did 3 designs for her in this. And I'm like, wow, we really went. And then Odin, we've got like 3 or 4 designs for him in this, if you throw in the bear. And I love all these designs, but there's like the old man with the cloak of stars. Then there's
the cloak of stars.
Yeah, me too.
Love it. And I love that Goliath's wings have the stars on
them. I did too. And Sleipnir has is covered with that. I thought that was all. I love the through line of that. But we also see him as the bear, and we see him in this sort of God mode thing, which I have to admit was a little. Much as I love Kirby, it was a little too Kirby-esque, I think, just because it's sort of like, oh, we're treading onto someone else's turf here. We should have gone a very different direction with this. But I think it looks fantastic. I just, it makes me a little antsy because it just feels so...
Too on the nose.
Yeah, Kirby. I just, by the way, went to this great Kirby exhibition here in Los Angeles at the Skirball Museum, Skirball Center. It's there for a month or so, and I know a big chunk of our audience probably isn't in the neighborhood, but if you are in the Los Angeles area, I can't recommend it enough. It is very comprehensive, and so much of Kirby's original art, and such a deep dive into his background and his history and all the things he did, which is just astounding. The backbone of comic books in the United States was Jack Kirby's backbone. His collaborations with Stan Lee, but also his stuff at DC Comics, and I was really sort of gratified that at the end of the exhibit, they also have all this stuff from movies and television shows that have been based on Kirby's characters, including the movie Black Panther and a lot of stuff from Marvel Universe and live action stuff, but also some animated stuff. And they have 3 clips from Young Justice in there with Kirby characters in there. And usually I feel like we get left out. And so I'm actually there, and I was like texting Brandon and Eddie and going, we counted this time. You know? I feel so seen. But because, you know, Brandon and I are both huge Kirby fans. So
who isn't?
Yeah, so I really recommend this exhibit at the Skirball Center in Los Angeles if you're in the vicinity. It's really fantastic. I think it's also free. They like ask for a donation, but it's kind of optional. I'm not sure they charge you.
That's how it is at some of the bigger museums here in New York City. You go to the Met or you go to the American Museum of Natural History. It's free to get in, but they ask for a donation, and I always give one.
Yeah, me too. But yeah, I got in for, you know, officially I got in for free, and so it's worth it. Anyway, off topic, but I thought I should mention it since we were talking about Kirby.
It makes sense. And, I mean, here's the thing, though. I mean, it's hard. Kirby is so, like you said, the backbone of so much that it's hard sometimes not to find that inspiration or / rip him off, because, I mean...
it's like within our whole like modern mythology now. Like when you think of Thor, you're not thinking of Norse-looking Thor. You're thinking of the modern comics Thor. Mm-hmm. So like that's so much of all the comics and stuff that has become part of our pop culture. So much of it comes from those people. It's
no one knows that Thor is red-headed anymore thanks to Jack Kirby. but no, I agree with you. Those designs are great. The armor, the old man in the cloak, the bear, and actually I have something to point this out. And what I like about the bear design is, yeah, it's obvious it's him shortly, but you play fair, but you also don't have that extreme close up on just the one eye. He's moving really quickly, but if you pay attention, you see it. You're not hiding it, but you're not focusing on it at the same time.
Yeah, but
it's not like hey, look here.
Right.
This is.
But I do like that Goliath keys in, and it's not like, wow, we're attacked by a bear. Where did that come from? You know, he's like, well, no, bear had one. I think the old man and the bear were one and the same. You know, I like that. He got up to speed on it pretty quick, and you know, he's a smart enough guy that the audience isn't like way ahead of him or anything. So.
Agreed. Sleipnir. He was fun to see, even if he only had 4 legs.
He had 8 legs. 4 of them were invisible.
There you go.
Glamour. He was glamoring.
And too difficult to animate.
That was the thing. I was like, hey, it's 8 legs. Let's do 8 legs. We're an animated show. We don't have to do a real horse. And Bob and Frank, it's too bad Frank took off, because this I bet he'd remember. Bob and Frank are like, no. I'm like, but look, we can, no. They were just like, you know, you won't like what it looks like when it gets back. It's just, and I'm sure they were right. It just, and so again, the sort of in-universe continuity is that, you know, Sleipnir in his own right is a kind of horse god. And so at this particular thing, he was, yeah, glamored or whatever as a 4-legged horse, but he's really an 8-legged horse. And when he sort of flies into the air there, you have to imagine all 8 legs are there, because you can't fly with just 4. And not
unless you're a reindeer.
Right. So I just assumed the other 4 were invisible.
That image of Odin and Sleipnir on the shield had 8 legs, so that was nice to see in Demona Issue 0.
Yep.
It's easier on a still shot. Also very symbolic on that shield. Not didn't have to
They didn't pose for the picture. Like,
Also, wielding Mjolnir there, which is interesting. But anyway, the let's talk about the Eye of Odin. We've talked about it a little bit when we did Eye of the Beholder, but this was such an interesting jewel, especially the effect it has on people. I don't think we ever really described exactly what it did to Fox or why it did it, but we talk about the power it provides, but insight. So that was an interesting touch. Jen, what do you think of the insight that we've seen in the eye provide on characters like Fox the Archmage and Goliath?
so we've only seen it with people with questionable morality so far, like, so we're seeing their darkness within. So seeing it flipped and seeing it on someone with a good heart and good intentions, and how it still corrupts them and in such a different way, I thought was really freaking cool. And a really good view into the magic of this world.
Absolute power corrupts absolutely. I mean, with Fox, it unleashed her inner savage beast, which she has been at various times of her life. And we haven't seen much of that lately, but it's probably still in there. With the Archmage, who was always kind of a cliched evil sorcerer, turned him into an even bigger cliched evil sorcerer. And as for Goliath,
to make when I was watching it this time, I was trying to think of how could have come at this in a way where he could have gotten the eye without a fight. The biggest thing is Elisa flat out saying, "Can't give him the eye." There's no way Goliath was going to fork over the eye. He's worried about it being used poorly anyway, especially to a god, I'm sure. But Elisa put the nail in the coffin with you can't give it to him.
Well, I think Odin sort of cops to this at the end of the episode. I think Odin made a bunch of missteps here. Elisa's cold. He could have approached as a friend and said, "Here, take this coat, take this cloak. Hey, I'd like to have a conversation with you." If he's approaching in friendship and just sort of explains, "I'm Odin. That's my eye. You give it to me and neutralize it for all time." And Bronx would have, Bronx is a good judge of character. He would have walked up to him and sort of, and Odin would have pat him. And Odin clearly has known gargoyles in the past, hasn't seen them in a while, but has known gargoyles in the past. And it all would have been, I think, fairly straightforward. But Odin is sort of walking into this in an adversarial place. So he's looking to barter. But what he's doing, not necessarily intentionally, but what he's clearly doing is he's putting Elisa's life at risk. He's not saying, "Here, take the cloak. Now let's talk." He's saying, "Give me the eye in exchange for the cloak." And so that puts Elisa in the position of doing exactly what you said, Jen, which is, no, don't do this for me. First off, he doesn't identify himself as Odin out of the gate either. So It's sort of like this strange old man somehow knows where to find us, knows what gargoyles are, and he wants the eye. And don't give him the thing just so that I can, get warm. We don't need that. We're not there yet. And she's a little self-sacrificing. I don't want to go so far as to call her a martyr here, but she's like, "No, it's not a fair trade. And we can't trust this guy." Well, of course you can't trust this guy because he's bartering with her life and safety for the sake of this magic jewel that we've seen transform two people into one kind of a monster or another. And then his next thing is to attack physically. And so, obviously you go into this thing, and Odin has made a bunch of missteps. His third misstep then is to kidnap Elisa and hold her hostage. Now, Odin comes from an era where taking a hostage was part of normal politics. We take a hostage, you pay a ransom. We take a hostage so that our people are safe until they return. Then we release the taking a hostage was I'm not saying it was fun for the hostage, but it was literally a part of standard negotiating in that era. Well, that's not how we view it today. It's not even how it was viewed in the 1990s, of course. So, it's like this is a terrorist act is what Odin's doing, but he's not viewing it that way. But he's not thinking in terms how our characters are going to view it. And my guess is if you look, not that I was consciously thinking about this, but if you look at how Hudson regarded the taking of Angel in Dark Ages, gargoyles clearly don't view hostages as just, oh yeah, it's a political thing. Don't overthink it. Don't get uptight about it. This is what we do.
Very personal to him.
Yeah, he takes it very personal. And so it's not surprising that Goliath does that for Elisa as well. And of course, at that stage, it's not just Goliath, but Angela and Bronx. They're all sort of, no one's trusting this guy. And these are missteps Odin made. And Odin seems, once we sort of all calm down, to be a relatively reasonable guy. But he really gets off on the wrong foot with our heroes to the point where Goliath just feels like, well, I can't give him the eye. I can't do it. But I also can't beat him. So what choice do I have? I've got to put it on. And so there's this great sort of tension that comes from, on the previously on Gargoyles, Goliath is going, I'm going to personally make sure that neither the eye or the Phoenix Gate ever get used again. Of course, we've already seen in MIA that Goliath used the Phoenix Gate. Never going to use it again. Unless I need it,
Yeah. Yeah.
And eyes never going to get used again. Unless I need it. There's a certain faith that Goliath has in his own integrity, in his own whatever, that generally speaking serves him pretty well, but not always.
Not always.
And this is obviously one of the biggest examples of that.
He's the villain of this episode.
It's not Odin. Odin is sort of the villain for Act 1. But for Act 2 and Act 3, it is Goliath. And I think that was a lot of fun for us, for Carrie, who wrote and storyed the episode, certainly for me, and I think for Keith, too.
Keith had to have a blast with this.
Yeah. I think that was a lot of fun for him. He gets to play Thalog, which is a different kind of villainy. But you have to go back literally to episode 1. Yeah, pretty much episode 1, pretty early on in this series. At the very beginning, we were able to use the gargoyles as our cliffhanger into the commercial break would be, what's Goliath going to do here? Is he going to tear them apart or whatever? The princess and the Magus or whatever. And of course, we knew that, no, he's a noble guy. He's not going to do that. But the gargoyles were so strange in those early episodes that we could get away with using them as our cliffhanger, But, we haven't been able to do that since very early in season 1. Certainly by season 2, everyone knows they're the good guys, right? Well, not here. Now we can use Goliath as the cliffhanger for the end of Act 1 and the end of Act 2.
And it's a little bit road to hell paved with good intentions.
Right.
Like his intentions are good, but it ultimately does corrupt him.
Yeah. Absolute power.
I mean, he pretty much he goes from a protector to pretty much the equivalent of a fascist throughout this. And it's really scary. Makes you wonder how many of them started out with decent intentions towards their country, their homeland. And then because you look at this and it just keeps escalating. He's all about protecting his, the people he cares about. In this case, Angela, Bronx, Elisa, and these two humans we just met. And he's going to take out Odin. But what happens let's say he takes out Odin. What happens then? Xanatos is still a threat. I think I should fly off to New York and permanently deal with them. I need to go find Demona and Thalog and wherever would have.
Yeah, every time someone pushes back, he ups it. Like anytime they're like, "Hey, maybe you should take that off." I'll need to keep everybody safe this way, and well, I'll put you in a cave, and I'm going to put a rock in front of it. Like he just pushes it further and further every time it's even suggested that he step away from it.
He's protecting them from themselves at that point. It's scary.
Yeah, they're the hostages. He's taken them all hostage now.
Mm-hmm. And like I said, just him, our hero, our stalwart hero with so much integrity doing this. It's unsettling to see, probably because it's so easy for someone with good intentions to become this in real life, even without a magical talisman bringing out the worst in you. And I'm not saying that people behaving this way right now that we could think of are people with good intentions. I'm not implying that at all, but...
Morgan Shepherd.
Yeah.
The late Morgan Shepherd.
Morgan Shepherd. What a voice.
Who apparently in real life only had one eye also.
He's so good in this. The voice, Angela has some great, really good lines too, where she, Bridget is really just nailing it. Good voice acting all around.
Let's talk about them for a bit. I mean, Cam Clark, he's been in the show as young Gilkingame before, and Cam Clark is one of those legendary voice actors now also. I mean, he was Liquid Snake in the Metal Gear Solid series. I think most famously he was Leonardo in the original Ninja Turtles cartoon, and so he's been around for a while. He's very good. And that was J.D. Daniels as Gunther, who was also Tom, who we never talked about when he was on. So this is kind of our last chance to. So was he an actual child actor, Greg, or was he?
He was. He was also like a stalwart for us. I mean, he was Tom and did multiple episodes as Tom, both in Avalon Part 1 and our first 2 episodes of Awakening. And then came back for this, he was fantastic young actor. I don't know what I'd be interested to know what he's doing now, because I haven't seen him, in 28 years or something. But he was terrific. I mean, just great, he was a kid, sounded like a kid, and yet gave you interesting reads that you weren't necessarily expecting, but just felt really very real. And yet, he gave us comedy when we needed it. He gave us pathos and everything in between. And here he did an accent. I mean, this kid comes in and
and this is not like you're like typical
Scandinavian accent. JD was
tough.
Was fantastic young actor, and hope he's doing well. It's been many years, but great guy.
Jenny, we're saying?
Just briefly thinking about the interactions between Eric and Gunther. The father-son moments that they have were really nice too. Felt real.
I was kind of curious. Eric sort of praises Gunther at the beginning of the episode, how well he played.
They played.
And I'm sitting there thinking, hockey? I don't know. I mean, what were they was
indoor
curling?
Sport. Indoor sport. Maybe it was basketball. Indoor sport, basketball. That was what I thought.
They've got to have sports that they... Immediately, my brain filled in hockey.
Yeah, that's where I went to, hockey, and that still feels like the most likely one. But curling is appealing.
Curling.
You broom better than anyone, kid.
And I think it's funny because what's clear is It's not like Carey, when he wrote that, looked up a sport that's likely to be played. So he kept it as generic as he possibly could keep it.
Probably a smart thing to do.
There's one line in this episode, though, that I know is mine. I actually remember putting it in, which is when Elisa's putting on the sweater at the farmhouse, and she's saying, "You sure you don't mind giving this to me?" He says, and Eric says, "I'm rich in sweaters." And I'm like, that one line I know was fun. I remember that line. There are other lines in there that are Carey's and are great, but that one line, "I'm rich in sweaters," I know it's mine.
In some ways, what I think is interesting about the Sturlusons is that they are the first, at least as far as we know at this point, they're some of the first characters we've met on the world tour who are, for the most part, ordinary people. They're not reincarnations of ancient heroes. They're not were panthers.
As far as you know.
As far as we know. As far as we know.
So, okay, here's my question. Where does this take place?
Like, where in Norway does this take place?
So it's Norway.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Odin says that.
Sturluson, I think Snorri Sturluson, who was basically a historian and politician in Iceland.
Yes, but he was of Norwegian descent. And
yes.
And
Hakon, King Hakon, killed him.
Of course, Snorri. Yeah. So I chose the Sturluson name because of Snorri, actually. Because if we're going to do Odin, let's we got
someone who put all the Norse
a last name for them. This is
together.
This is the one that sort of because most of what, not all, but most of what we know about Norse mythology, we know from the writings of Snorri Sturluson. And I actually didn't know he was Icelandic, but I thought that's a Norwegian name. You know, he was an emigre, or his family was, to Iceland. And so I figure there's probably Sturlusons in Norway. Not that I checked back then or since, but I'm assuming.
There's probably a pretty
nowadays I probably would check, because you could do that on the internet pretty quickly, but back then there was no way to do that without a bunch of research, and that wasn't something we were going to bother researching. It just felt right, so we gave him that name. This is literally set.
The whole thing is about the mythology of it all. The man who wrote down most of that mythology is a good name to use.
Yeah, I'll admit at the time I was vaguely familiar with Norse legends. I was not as familiar as I was with Greek legends or even Egyptian legends at the time, but I still recognized Odin right away. And obviously, at the time, I'd read plenty of Thor comics that Marvel published. Again, there's that Jack Kirby influence, and that battle between these two gods, Goliath is a god, and Odin is just. There's a great touch that I notice whenever Odin uses any of his powers, the eye just flares and suddenly Goliath is copying that power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought that was a really nice touch that Carey put in there, that Goliath has this power, but he doesn't know how to use it until he sees it sort of demonstrated. And then the eye sort of, like you said, glows, and he suddenly...
He even mentions earlier in the episode.
He's always doubling down. In other words, Odin does something with it, and Goliath then does a bigger version of it. And then by the end, he's literally absorbing Odin's life force. And what we tried to get across, and we were conscious of, is that that in a sense he was doing what Jackal had done to Anubis back in Greece. That Odin was becoming an avatar for Odin, and was in essence gonna, if this had gone forward, if Angela hadn't figured out how to turn Goliath, by the time it was done, Odin would just have been completely absorbed into this uber Goliath figure, and would have ceased to exist in the way that Anubis sort of was absorbed into First Jackal and then the Emir.
That's interesting.
The only regret I have actually is that we didn't think to do the double voice thing that we did with Tony J, because that would have worked.
That would have been epic.
And we had the Avatar idea, so I should have thought of that, but I didn't.
Making 52 episodes at that speed, so we get it. Again, the show came out magnificently in spite of all that. So, but it's no, it was a great fight scene. I like how even there Odin comes off as reasonable, and again in Act 3 when they're dueling, I am not the threat. He's delivering some pretty harsh truths to Goliath, and what I like is his line: "What he has lost in strength, he has more than gained in wisdom." Although that makes me wonder something. Odin famously traded his eye for wisdom. Is he reneging on that by taking his eye back?
No, because he traded it to Mimir, and Mimir was later killed and beheaded. So the eye's been just sort of floating around, maybe even in Demona #1, but maybe. Not that I'm admitting anything, but it's been on a journey since, and so I think it's fair game for him to claim it. What wisdom he got, and he didn't steal it from Mimir, and he's not the one who killed Mimir. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing Mimir right, by the way, but I'm saying it a lot. But yeah, I think that's fair game for him to take back. And obviously, I sort of actually like the anticlimax at the end of when Odin finally does get the eye back and puts it back in his head, and we're like, okay, what happens when Odin has it? Oh, it's
his eye. It's just his fucking eye.
Yeah. So it's like, good, all right.
Gotta go. Thanks.
It goes back to where it's supposed to be, in essence. It stops being a talisman. It stops being a totem, and it just goes back to being what it was before he gave it up.
Someone brought them here because Odin was here.
Odin said he drew the craft at one point.
Yeah. So he called to it?
Yeah, he
called to his eye?
I think he sensed it, and so he sort of pulled the skiff towards Norway. It's the first time, probably the only time, when, as opposed to Avalon deciding where they would go, this time Odin gave it a nudge, and drew it towards him and his land. He calls it, it's his home turf, and he brings it there. It to me, again, I don't think in a lot of shows, you do something called the Eye of Odin. It's a MacGuffin, right? Or it's a magic talisman, and you don't necessarily think, oh, this. I mean, in Gargoyles, yeah, you
expect
would
the guy to show up and ask for it.
Yeah, but I think way back when we were doing the show in the 90s, the fact that Odin was actually showing up, I think that was kind of revolutionary. It doesn't sound like it should be revolutionary. You got the Eye of Odin. So yeah, Odin shows up. But that's something that we're more familiar with now. I think back then, I don't think anyone was expecting Odin to show up. But that was the kind of follow through that we like to have on the show. Again, Michael Reeves writes a one-liner about some Emir that we don't even see. And we're going to see that Emir. Okay, so the Eye of Odin, which, again, was, I think we've mentioned this before, was originally created by the
video game
for the Sega Genesis game. And we, said, sure, let's put it in the show too. So it's got more, so the game has, more touchstones with the TV show. But there was no specific thought initially of, oh, we got to put Odin in. But, once we call something the Eye of Odin, from my standpoint, and those of us making the show, it's like, okay, yeah, we're going to follow up on that. That's going to turn out to be a seed that we planted way back in Eye of the Beholder, or I guess even before that, right? Didn't we originally show that?
Yeah.
Way back in season 1. It just feels like a throwaway MacGuffin. Xanatos donates it to a museum.
I have the eye back in my possession.
Yeah. You don't see it. You don't see it with any mystic power in the edge. Nope. It's just a MacGuffin. And it builds to this through the Avalon 3-parter all the way to this. And again, it's one of the things that I think it's that kind of follow through that the show had that I think is one of the things that makes it sort of made it last as long as it has, made it, still feel current.
It made it very unique at the time, for sure.
Yeah, it wasn't the type of thing you saw back then.
Nope.
A MacGuffin would be a MacGuffin. It would be in an episode and it would be gone.
Even in live action. Yeah. So, Angela's ruse. I love it. Here's something a lot of people don't note about Angela, but I've started noting, especially in recent years. She's very cunning.
She is. She like, there's a couple of times in this episode where it's like, oh, she is such a smart cookie. Like, I just love Angela in this episode.
Me too. I mean, I know she comes off as naive and often is, and I think that tends to overshadow her cunningness in the mind of a lot of fans, to the point where a lot of fans don't even notice it, which, to be honest, helps her cunningness because you don't see it coming.
Yeah,
so
I don't think of her as naive. I think she's somewhat ignorant of modern culture and modern ways. She's been living on this island where, by the way, it's always summer.
I loved that line too.
Yeah, it becomes this thing where Elisa's cold that her life is in danger, but you can tell in this, and it's well boarded and animated. Angela is cold. Now, not cold like it's life threatening, but it's like, this is not something I have experienced before.
This is new to me,
and I'm not sure I like it. Goliath wraps his wings around to try to shelter Elisa, but Angela is wrapping her wings around herself also, because it's effing cold here.
Damn it!
And I grew up in Southern California. I grew up in Avalon, and I'm not used to this kind of stuff. It's not going to kill her. She's constitutionally a gargoyle, but at the same time, she does not like it being that cold.
She's got her preferences.
So
the look on her face, though, when she's just like, no, I'm doing this for a reason. I'm calling for help for a reason.
She's in the chasm. Yeah, Elisa's completely ready to pull her out, but she didn't really need help getting out.
And I love it. Lisa's like, oh, I wish I would have thought of that.
You would think Elisa would have been the one to think of that, and no, it's Angela, and I love that it's Angela.
Love it.
Some might say Goliath came around a little quickly, but one, it's 22 minutes, and two, I mean, if the eye enhances your inner self, he still has that integrity. He's still that guy, even if all of his negative qualities are being pushed forward.
He's still that protector.
Yeah.
He's still her father, and he may have gotten annoyed. I mean, Goliath has some incredibly dismissive lines, particularly for him. It's like, pack up, we've got to get going. And Elisa's like, what about Angela and Brox? Oh, we'll pack them too. That's like so, dehumanizing or degargoylizing or whatever. He's just regarding them as baggage. Or lines like, my protection is withdrawn. He gets umbrage, and when they're defying him, and he's like, fine, then, whatever. But when push comes to shove, these are people he loves. And when one of them is actually in danger, thankfully, he is so far gone that he isn't able to save her, which, of course, is what she's counting on. And it was a big risk because that wall was closing.
There's a moment where he's like, wait a minute, what am I doing? And he goes and gets her. And like, if he had hesitated even a little bit more, because he like grabs her and flings her out of there. Like,
Also, that moment is one of the. There's a couple. Generally speaking, I thought the animation in this episode was pretty good, but those horns on Goliath's helmet,
having a life of their own.
Yeah, every once in a while, they're doing some wacky stuff. You know, the perspective on them, I'm sure, was really hard to keep track of from frame to frame, from an animation standpoint. Again, those kind of horns in CGI would have been, you draw them once,
nothing, yeah,
and then it moves with the character. It's all fine. But in 2D animation, you got to draw them every single frame. So every once in a while, there would be some bizarre movements, and right when he's coming back to himself as his head lowers down, those horns go woo. I saw that last night. I'm like, oh, that's not good. That's a really bad moment for that to happen in, because this is a big key turnaround moment. And I really do think if viewers sort of felt like Goliath's switch was too, instantaneous or whatever, one of the things that contributed to that negative feeling subconsciously was those horns going out of whack. You just feel like, wait, this isn't right. And even if you're not focused on the horns specifically, I really do think bad animation hurts a script. It just, it's not a wonderful.
Yeah, it can definitely take you out of the moment.
Yeah. But I do like also just throughout this world tour, the sort of rapport that builds up between Elisa and Angela, this sort of sisterly, with Elisa's kind of the big sister, but Angela not just being relegated to baby sister, but holding her own. But they just develop this real respect and rapport for each other. I just think it's sort of lovely. I mean, Elisa's never going to be a mother figure to Angela the way Catherine is, the way Damona is even. And this, despite the fact that Elisa, in essence, is in a relationship with Angela's father, it doesn't change the fact that they still have this sisterly relationship, and I think that evolved really organically. It's not even like, we sat down in the writer's room and planned it out. I just think it began to sort of evolve, and I think there was a certain feeling of that in the booth with Sally and Bridget.
You can really see it and hear it.
It feels really good to me.
Yeah, there's back on our Mark of the Panther episode. He mentioned that Loki was briefly considered for this episode. And the time he decided not to because he had enough tricksters who were interested for. And I love Loki. I love Loki as a character, whether he's played by Tom Hiddleston or not, or whether he's, even long before I knew about the Marvel character, I actually was familiar with the mythological Loki first. But I think leaving him out of this, even without the trickster thing, was a good thing, because I feel like had he been there, it would have taken away from Goliath becoming the villain of the episode.
I want to be clear. It's not like, there's a version of this script that had Loki in it. This was just a really early discussion before we broke the story or anything. We're doing Norse gods. We're going to do Odin. Do we want anyone else? Thor? Do we want Loki? And I think the Loki thing, was sort of dismissed on. We got enough tricksters, and this story probably has enough in it. But I also, when I thought about it more, I also am thinking in terms of that, and I think that Ragnarok happened. And so there are certain characters, because one of the things about the Norse gods, as opposed to the Greek gods, for example, is that the Norse gods were created as mortal gods. They were killable. Now, they had apples of youth, and they would live forever if you didn't kill them. But Balder gets killed, and in Ragnarok, which leads to Ragnarok, and in Ragnarok, multiple gods die. So I also was thinking in terms of who would have survived, and for me, I felt like it's very clear that Thor dies in Ragnarok. It's very clear that Loki dies in Ragnarok. For Odin, there's a sort of an escape clause because his son, Odin, is swallowed whole riding Sleipnir and then his son Valley, I think, rips open the jaws of Fenrir, and so there, I felt like there's this escape clause that Odin and Sleipnir could have then survived it if we wanted to play it that way. But I didn't want just all the Norse gods running around still, because it seemed to me that most of them, or at least a big chunk of them, would be gone, and a couple of them, it's sort of objectively stated in the mythology that they died. And I didn't want to lose that idea of mortal gods, because I think that's something that is really unique to Norse mythology, as opposed to most mythologies where the gods are unkillable and that kind of thing.
Agreed.
So that I mean, Loki was briefly considered, but really, really early in the process, and so there's not like a version of this story where it's Loki who turned Goliath into what this. There's nothing like that. We didn't get that far down the road thinking about Loki being in it.
Gotcha. All right, we can begin to wrap things up. Any final thoughts on this episode? Jen, do you have any final thoughts on this episode?
I like that Goliath is the only one we see that takes the eye off himself. Like a hobbit could have marched into Mordor kind of thing. Like, it's the pure heart was able to resist the eye when it came down to it.
Although Goliath in this case is actually a little bit stronger than a hobbit, because Frodo did not take that ring off willingly at the end.
Well, no. He came home with one less finger.
But no, that's actually...
Someone else wouldn't have even made it to Mount Doom.
But no, I mean, I have seen, again, I'll shout out to him because doing that quite a bit lately. Todd Jensen has often compared this to the One Ring. It corrupts, except in this case, returning it to its creator is a good thing, as opposed to giving the One Ring back to Sauron.
Good point.
All right.
So I really, it's a different episode. Goliath is the villain. There's no big villain horribleness at the end when he gets the eye back. And we get on the skiff and we head off to Avalon again.
And Odin rides up the Rainbow Bridge, which which is nice to see. Which is very nice to see. All right. Okay, I think we can wrap things up. This is going to be coming out on May 30th. Is anyone want to promote anything? May 30th.
May 14th, Spectacular Spider-Man number 15, which is the last issue, unfortunately, of that series. But I think we go out with a bang. I think it's a very cool issue. So I hope everyone, goes off to their comic book store, picks it up. I had a great time doing those 15 issues. Sorry it ended, but I'm really proud of the stories that we did there. And then on May 28th, which is, if this comes out on the 30th, was just a couple days ago, Demona #1 is out. It's a big story. I miss it.
I cannot wait. Well, by now I'll have already read it, but we'll both have already read it. But yeah, cannot wait. It's going to be good.
You know that I kind of like Demona, so.
Yeah, me too. Kind of.
Yeah.
Kind of. Only a little.
Little tiny bit, though.
All right. So, Greg, thank you for coming on. Frank, I know you're already gone, but thank you for coming on. And Jennifer, thank you for everything you do, always keeping us on point. And for our fans, thank you for listening. And join us next time as we head on over to New Olympus.
So we did Norse gods. Now we're heading to Greek gods.
Nice.
We wanted someplace warmer.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Mediterranean climate, assuming that's where it is, which is probably it's not. Anyway, we'll see you all next time.
Thank you for listening to Voices from the Eyrie, a Gargoyles podcast, powered by the Spidey Dude Radio Network, located at spidey-dude.com. If you like this show, then please listen to Spectacular Radio, based on the Spectacular Spider-Man animated series, which features some familiar voices. You can also find these great podcasts: Clone Saga Chronicles, Make Mine Mayday, Amazing Spider-Man Classics, the Sal Buscema Podcast, and Books of X. All of this and more on the Spidey Dude Radio Network. And please follow us on Twitter at From Eyrie. That's From EYRIE. And join us on Patreon at patreon.com/SpideyDude Network for more exclusive content. Thank you.
Pack your essentials.
What about Angela and Bronx?
We will pack them too.